You're listening to The Founder Fix, a podcast by Maiku. We're here to sit with you in the messy, hard, and often ridiculous reality of building startups.
And as you're talking, you know, the irony is we've talked about debloating, and part of being debloated is being lean and being agile and being fast.
I agree. I actually spoke to a founder and she had a product and she didn't feel like it was ready, right? And she kept putting it off, and I'd known her probably 9 months. And at some point I called the BS button and said, cool, for this 30 days, like, you're not allowed to use your solution, like, at all. You have to just create relief for people. And we talked about what that could look like. And within 4 weeks, she had shared vulnerability publicly around the problem she was trying to solve, gotten a heap of engagement online, actually sent out her first invoice, built a prototype that could go live the next day in 4 weeks. And it was really about, as you say, you can move fast and move agile and lean. But before you're ever going to see that happen, you've got to make that mental shift to, I want to relieve a pain each week for somebody. Because if that's what you focus on, that's where the vulnerability came from. Because how do I find the people who I can relieve this week? Okay, I'm going to share something vulnerable and see who's hurting. And suddenly she was fast.
Yeah. And it just becomes such a confidence feedback loop within itself, doesn't it? Plus you learn and you recognize your own biases in the process. And there's so much to come of it. I want to ask you, what's your interpretation, because I've got my own, of this idea of when you're building something? And I think I see it in the product world more so than the service-based founders, but where you're building something and the release is almost like there's such a resistance to put it out there. So it's that holding on. You've just described that with this particular client that you've had, but it's that holding on to, I'm still in build phase. I'm still in build. I've got to tweak. I've got to test. I've got to pilot. Like, what's that about for you? What patterns do you see?
It's fear. Everything is fear. It's fear-based. It's fear of rejection. It's,
I was going to ask you, like, fear of what? Because fear is really big. So what?
Fear of rejection.
Fear of rejection. And why does that matter? Like, fear of rejection for who, for why?
Holding their identity to their solution.
I think you're onto something there.
One of my favorite quotes is, never hold your ego so close to your opinion that when your opinion changes, your ego goes with it. And I see the gambler's mindset come in with a founder where they've invested time and energy in a particular idea that then pivoting to market feedback is really complicated for them, because they're holding the money they've spent, the time they've spent, and the number of people they've told about this thing, right? Yeah. They're holding their ego to their opinion, but they're not, that they really do struggle with putting it on a shelf and saying, I need to get curious with what the market's telling me.
Yeah. And I really see that, especially in the social impact space, where there's that, and I've experienced it myself, that over-identification with the solution that you're trying to bring to the world. And so that if that solution doesn't articulate in the way that you imagined it might, or it could, or it should, then what does that say about you as a person? Yeah, for me, it's a personalization component part. If I've got a product that I'm building and I haven't released yet, then the only person to blame right now is myself. Because the minute I put it to market, if it doesn't do well, then I have to then factor in who's rejecting it and why, and is that about me, and therefore I'm a failure. And I think we've just got such a crisis, and maybe it's always been a crisis in the founder community in general, but we've got such a crisis around resistance for failure, that I think it's the depersonalization that wins.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in sessions where I've had founders say, I needed my website to be live before. And I said, cool, give yourself 1 hour and go live with your website. They're like, what are you talking about? I was like, I didn't have my website till I had 500 users. Because
I love it.
I just wanted to help founders. So I put something out on social media and said, can I help founders? Anyone need help? And I started helping them, and then I started charging them. And then eventually I was like, oh crap, now I need to actually build something to automate this because I'm drowning in paperwork. And the automation I ended up building was more about being able to scale because I couldn't keep up with paying customers, as opposed to the build and they will come model.
Yes. Yeah. I learned that the hard way.
Focus on helping. I just want to relieve somebody. Then maybe your solution is helpful, but maybe your solution, like I've got founders that I'll work with for a year before I'll even show them Maiku.
Yeah.
Because what they need that week from me, like I'm still earning revenue from them, but what they need from me that week is not another toolkit.
Yeah.
And until they're ready and they've shown that gumption, they've shown the certain behaviors that tell me they now need the structure, right, to scale, I'm not going to add noise and try to sell them a product. I'm going to continue to sit with them and help them through the pain of the founder journey.
That's a trust piece though, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the recognition that this isn't a one-way journey, that as a founder, you're not contributing something that is yours and everybody says, oh, thank you very much for being alive and putting this out there. It's a reciprocal process. And in order for it to be successful, whatever your idea of success is, it requires input from the person that you're purporting you want to serve.
Yeah.
So if you don't have that feedback loop in the early stages, it's recognizing you can choose that, but you're missing out on the opportunity to have that co-design element and the cooperative, and I also just think that there's an argument for stretching that vulnerability muscle early.
Oh yeah, because any feedback you're getting from a non-paying customer to me is noise, because when you suddenly send them an invoice,
Agreed,
and they don't pay, you're like, everything I've built was based on what they said, and they said they were going to pay this. And like, if you can help someone from day one who just feels pain, and you can charge them up to be with them and sit with them and help. And if it means picking up the phone and helping them cull some bills, whatever your startup is actually going to do, whatever your solution is going to do, but just sitting with them manually and helping them is going to build trust and authority. And anything you build from then on, you're going to have such a good filter, because you know the noise is gone, because you're actually getting data points and seeing the jobs being done by paying customers who feel the pain and are willing to actually hand the credit card over to you for you to help them.
Yeah, interesting. So when I hear that, I hear the news story that's coming onto the founder scene and the entrepreneurial circuit, which is don't bother with your freemiums, don't bother with your free webinars, from a marketing perspective, from a funnel perspective, only ever go into your marketing funnels with a paid service. I don't entirely disagree with that. I think that what you're saying has some merit. Where I think the risk is more so is that if your philosophy is that you can best test with a free-to-play market only and get the market feedback that you need in order to demonstrate the viability, the feasibility in who you're wanting to sell to eventually, you're probably serving up the wrong recipe. But I do think that we could maybe tweak our ideas around what other transactions, in addition to credit cards, might equally give us feedback.
Okay.
And again, so social girly pop putting a hand up here. I'm all for equitable access. And for me, the one thing that I refuse to move on in my own business is I never want money to be a budget. So for me, it's getting a holistic testing community together. I want the end part of the financial peak point, if you like, and I want to push that to see where can I go to commercially and viably from a monetization perspective with my offer, and whose voice might I be missing out on if the only determinant of success is based on financial gain?
Got it. Okay.
Does that make sense?
So I'm going to push back on that from the perspective of, and I love this because we're like finally get to like
juicy. We're not agreeing with something for the first time.
This is exciting. I think if you look at it as a win map, right, and generating a win map. So this is a new concept that I've essentially just been saying to founders, like, I don't know if it's a term out there. I've just started using it.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it.
What does the map look like in getting a customer from win to win? And as part of that, identifying as they hit from win to win, whether they are a green flag customer that you should nurture a yellow flag that you need to investigate if they're green or red, or a red flag you need to move to like an automated nurture campaign because they might be a future customer, but they're not your priority right now. And as an example, I put out a post recently that shared, hey, it was saying, I want to help founders from themselves. This is a problem that I see that founders are facing. Which of these three things are your top priority right now? And so that was it was creating a win for the founders who, you know, one replied saying, this couldn't have been more timely. I'm feeling everything you've just shared. Like, I'm really struggling with this. And so that's their first win, right? Because they're feeling seen, they're feeling heard. And then I responded with, hey, like, here with you. And I responded like with some, you know, maybe a quick tip or something, and said, if you want to DM me, more than happy to share some specific feedback that might help you uncover like what's this blocker is, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Then I get this. So they got a response within 24 hours. So they got that second win. Now, then they DM'd me, and it was this huge bit of information, which I love. And every time a founder does that, like the first time they reach out to me, it's usually a huge brain and heart dump, and they always apologize for it, but I love it. I was able to take that. And then, as we talked about before, so I generated custom feedback to them, which could sound like a waste of time because they may or may not be an ideal customer and it's one-on-one. But I used that feedback that I gave him and generated, using my AI template that I built, 3 or 4 resources that I then put into Micro for all my Micro users. So the time helping this stranger still benefited my current founders, right? And I made sure at the end of that saying, hey, if you want a one-on-one and we can deep dive into X, Y, and Z, here's the link. And then he was, instead of booking 1 hour, he's like, hey, I saw on your website actually you do 2 hours. Can I book 2 instead? And then a one-on-one session. And so in that, even before the one-on-one session, I sent him this deep level form that he filled out so I could have an agenda ready. And the goal was to take them on a journey where they self-discover some stuff before the session as to what's actually going wrong. And then at the end of that session, I'm like, what did you uncover by answering this? And that's always like, oh gosh, I realize I'm really doing this, like as a founder. And so they get that win even before we catch up.
Yeah.
And then we have our session. So he's had like 5 or 6 wins, and I've received revenue, and my community have received these blogs.
Yeah.
And so I argue that you're right. I did reach out, and there was a level of free in there.
Yeah.
But I didn't do my first one-on-one for free. And things like a workshop, I would be more than happy to even charge as low as $2, because the act of pulling out a credit card to me says, as a founder, for my green flag behavior, it's I'm willing to invest in something that will help me move the needle as a founder. And for me, that's an identifier as my ideal customer.
I was waiting for the point where you're going to disagree, because I think we're saying the same thing in different language.
That's a shame.
But I can, okay, so here we go. Disagreeing challenge. I disagree with the pulling out the card as the green flag. And I want to be really clear on why. If I've got a product or a service that I'm wanting to sell for $500, somebody putting $2 on the table because that's all they can afford to invest in themselves for whatever reason isn't enough of a green flag for me to be able to justify investing in a $500 offer. I need to go find the people who not only want the offer, but can afford to pay for the offer.
Fair.
Right? Where I say that for me, I don't like budget to be a barrier, is that despite how much money you have in your pocket, the majority of humans have the handful of similar pain points, desires, human drives. And some of us, through different reasons, that's beyond this podcast, find ourselves with different layers of financial ability in our pockets. It doesn't mean that I can't learn about my market across the board and potentially have greater impact if I do so. I could find out more working with somebody who has $2 in their pocket that applies to the person that has $500 in their pocket, maybe not specifically through context, but certainly at the human heart component part. And so where I think we're probably speaking the same language is, for me, it's about separating what of this is commercial that I need to test. So where do I find the market that fits my dollar component part that pays, gives me a return, puts food on the table, all the things, keeps me financially viable, versus what is the transaction that I can have with another human that makes this a reciprocal journey instead of me just constantly falling into the trap of giving.
Agreed.
It's another cop-out card, in my opinion, coming from a reformed giver, reforming giver. It's another way to stay safe. If I'm always testing and I'm always giving and I'm the person who just loves to be equitable in my approach and make sure I can help everybody, then I end up not helping myself and I end up with a financially, debunked business. It's not sustainable. So it's separating the idea that the only way to get a green flag is from the credit card, and more around like, how do I identify where that financial piece is in the market, and then what can I learn from everybody else, and what's the trade-off?
Where I would argue is there's a mainstream market where that makes a lot of sense because it's your go-to-market strategy, right? And you're trying to get through product market fit. But I think at the earlier stage when you're going, I almost feel like there's two steps to pricing. There's the pricing in the future that's going to be, I need to, it needs to cover my costs, it needs to make me profit, it needs da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
But there's the initial, which is, I'm finding people, no, not even testing pricing. Like, let's say, for example, in the future, it's going to be $500.
Yeah.
But right now, it's going to be $49, as an example. And the only reason is, if it's not a big enough pain point for an early adopter, they're not going to pay $49. And you'll end up running free stuff with them to learn. And but when suddenly you've got your pricing ready to go at $500, they don't convert. And having someone put some level of skin in the game to say, this problem is big enough and important enough right now, and willing for you to help me, and I'm willing to hand you whatever amount, no matter how small.
Yeah.
It's that transaction that says there's a pain point that's big enough for them to act. And so you're right. Yeah. You're right. There are other ways of thinking about transactions, but to me, there is no better way to say, I feel this pain enough to hand you whatever that value of transaction is. And if you're identifying the 8 out of 10s for your first 100 people, you're going to have a really hard time of getting to product market fit because you're not getting past the problem solution bit.
Damn, we have to agree again. That's so boring.